Oh, hello there. It's been a while. So, I want to show you guys something that I did. Yeah, I can't believe I did this, and it's such a shame that GW doesn't do anything like this at this scale.
Within each one of us, that the entirety of the cosmos is
Welcome back, collectors. Yeah, it's been a while since I've done a video, and things have been really busy in the studio because we're going in a new direction of 3D printing, and this is the very first video of how I want to be showing you guys my process. The videos are going to be very different from the past because the past videos are going to be focused on telling you how to paint the materials and how to do it quickly, which is quite frankly not how I usually paint my miniatures. I'm going to show you guys step by step, and I'm going to document the entire process of how I painted this 3D printed Sisters of Battle at 75mm scale.
So Warhammer is a tabletop miniatures game, and it's by Games Workshop. So they produce a lot of miniatures, and basically they are like chess pieces, and they are very highly detailed at 32mm scale and not at 75mm scale.
So let's not waste any more time, and I'm going to show you guys my 3D printing process.
So right here, this is our 3D printer. As you can see, it's a dual rail system 3D printer. It really allows the prints to be a lot more stable. First step, of course, we gotta top up the resin. Shake, and we're gonna top it up. A good habit is to make sure that the resin level is well topped up so that you don't fail halfway with the lack of resin. All topped up. Now we're gonna stir the resin back. This is really important because we're gonna go for really long prints. And I tend to print really slowly so that the quality is not compromised. And after you get the thing all stirred up, we'll install the build plate and we can get ready to print. Make sure that everything is nice and tight. Very good. And we can start the print. So how 3D printing works: if you live under a rock, it goes down, a UV layer is exposed and it comes out. And this is done maybe over 1,000 times, more than that for bigger prints, up and down with the supports, and that's how your model is slowly formed. Alright, so as you can see, all the models come with supports, and we are gonna take them out one by one. This process can take some time, and you don't want to rush this part because you might damage the model. Just slowly pry the model off the build plate, get it cleaned in alcohol, and we're gonna expose it in ultraviolet light to make sure that the model isn't sticky and ready for painting.
So that was my process of 3D printing. We at the studio, we've been doing 3D printing for the past few months, and not everything was all roses. We really had to learn and experiment so that we optimized our process. If you are interested to learn anything about 3D printing, let me know down in the comments below if you want me to produce a video like that. Then maybe we could explore some tips and tricks of 3D printing in the future. So after 3D printing, we're going straight into painting. So let's not waste any more time, and let's get straight to painting the miniature right now.
Alright, so we're gonna get the model ready for painting. First, we gotta get it primed. I'm using black Krylon primer because it's one of my favorites. It's really smooth and very matte. Just go over several layers to make sure that the 3D print is well covered and uniformly black before we proceed on to the airbrush stage. This is how it looks after the model has been primed black. As you can see, while it says matte, it still has a little bit of sheen, which in my opinion is a good thing because it shows how high definition the primer is. Okay, so now once that's done, I'm going to be using magenta ink from Liquitex. Okay, magenta ink is really important here because you want to ensure that there's a high level of saturation while not altering the value too much. If you're not sure what value and saturation is the intensity of color, while value is the absolute brightness and darkness. So this is how I interpret colors in this scale, and I'm just gonna do a uniform coating of magenta ink all over the model. This allows the entire model to be tinted while not being too much highlighted. If you look very closely into the shadows, all the shadows have a tinge of magenta in it. Alright, next up, we're gonna thin down some black green. This is gonna be my initial first pre-shading highlight. Mix it well and good in the airbrush. Alright, you want to make sure that this is very well mixed, and we're gonna just backflow it so that it's all nice and bubbled up. Next up, from upper 45 degree from the right hand side, I'm gonna apply this color. Might be surprised why I'm doing this weird color changes, but just trust in the process, because this underpainting stage is very important when creating complex color changes. For this project, I'm challenging myself to paint black without actually using the color black. So that's why I'm gonna be using many colors here to really push up the saturation of the armor panels so it gives the impression that it's black. Next up, this is gonna be my highlight color. I'm gonna be using dark green gray, and this is all from AK Generation 3. As usual, you just have to make sure that the paint is well mixed in the airbrush before you go spray it, otherwise the airbrush might clog. So again, from the top right hand corner, 45 degrees once more, I'm applying the same color that I mentioned. Just build it up gradually. One tip I will give to you is, because when you're airbrushing, paints tend to dry at a different value and saturation. You want to let the paint dry a little bit before deciding to see whether you want to add further layers on. And this is the end of the airbrush stage. So at this stage, we have created a pretty complex looking base color, and this base color is going to be the basis of how we're going to build upon the paintwork that we'll do after this. Don't worry, if you don't have an airbrush, you can always do this step with a brush.
So I get that this is a 3D printing tutorial, so many of you guys might not have experience painting by brush. So fret not, I have many videos documenting how I paint materials step by step on my channel. So you can feel free to pause the video now and go check out the other videos in my channel. How this video is different from the other videos that I'm producing is that it really goes step by step and in depth, color by color, of how I'm going to be producing the effects that you see in the final stage. And I'm going to be heavily dependent on just the brush itself. I get that this is not a beginner tutorial and some of you guys might be confused with certain steps that I'm painting. So fret not, remember, just comment down below and I'll be happy to address any of your questions. So without further ado, let's get to painting right now.
So in my painting process, I like using wet palette. Wet palette allows you to keep the paint moist for longer, and for me I just use regular old baking paper right here. Just tear it off. I'm really quite particular because I really want the edges to be straight. I really cannot stand baking paper when they are like torn without the serrated edge. Okay, from here we're just gonna tear it into half. And just make sure we use the right amount of baking paper over the wet palette. You don't want to use too much baking paper because it's honestly a waste. And yeah, just lay it over a sponge. For mine, I'm using red grass wet palette. Next up, I'm going to squeeze on some paint. Right here, I'm going to be using German Field Grey as well as Medium Sea Grey. These are going to be my initial colors. Next up, I'm going to just mix them up in a roughly 50-50 ratio. This will be my initial highlights for the colors. And I'm going to be using these colors to paint on the sketches on the Sisters of Battle armor. At this point in time, there's really no need to be too neat. However, one point that I would share with you guys is that you really need to know the shapes of the highlights. This will help accentuate the model and communicate the form to the audience. And when you do that, your model will look a lot more dynamic and the highlights will look a lot more coherent. Okay, after this first highlight, we're going to go on by adding a little bit more medium sea grey into the mix. You can push it all the way up to pure medium sea grey. And as you can see right here, I'm doing it in a very sketch style. I'm leaving a lot of brush strokes behind because I want this project fundamentally to be a pretty fast project and don't want to spend too much time on it. Alright, so next up I'm going to be adding in a little bit of French blue. So the French blue, what I'm going to be using it for is I'm going to be using it to highlight the metal cables. So these metal colors have a different color temperature compared to the black. So I'm going to use it for the gun barrels and all the other silver metallic parts. Next on the list, a little bit of green brown. This is definitely going to be for the gold areas. Instead of thinking of base coating, rather I'm creating like a shadow highlight from this. This is going to be the next highlight from the darkest layer, and I want to retain a little bit of the green and magenta that I've airbrushed before that. This really helps tie the entire piece together because all the materials have a similar tone in the shadow, signifying that there is some light and well other environmental occurrences that affect the model in unison. Next up, I'm going to be using a little bit of mahogany brown mixed in with a little bit of magenta and a little bit of German fuel grey. Okay, so this color, what I'm going to be using it for is I'm going to use it for the base color of the face. I know it looks a little bit harsh right now, but trust in the process. A little bit of warning right here, I couldn't record the whole process of me painting the face, so there will be more footage if you click in the video. Links will be in the description below. Next up, I'm just going to be base coating the loincloth on this Sisters of Battle. One interesting point is that you notice that I'm constantly adding in a little bit of magenta into all my colors. This is because there's an environmental light of magenta in the environment, and I want to have a tinge of that affecting every single base color. With this, I think the entire base coating stage is done, and we can start moving on to the more exciting parts, which is layering and where the model really starts to pop. Because now we've divided all the models into parts, we can now look at, well, our midpoint, where this is how the model looks with everything base coated. Well, it's not the best yet, but trust me, the next stage will make the model look even much better. Just follow on. Okay, so we're gonna add in some highlights from here. As you can see, adding in a little bit of magenta to just tint the pale blue. This is a pretty high value color, and I'm gonna be using this for the armor. I'm just gonna paint up the shapes. Because the shapes are communicative, I can tell the audience that, well, the chest plate has two round orbs on it, the arms are actually cylinders, and well, the backpack has more orbs on it. At this point of time, I'm not bothering to smooth down my strokes because it is my intention to make sure that this process is looking as sketchy as possible. Adding in a little bit of sand yellow mixed in with a little bit, just a touch of magenta. This is going to be the highlight for the gold color. At this point of time, you can have a look. If you're not sure how to paint the shapes, fret not. You can always just take the model and put it under a strong light. Under the strong light, take a black and white photo of the model, and you can see where exactly are the highlights landing on and what shapes are there. Most importantly, take note of the shape of the highlight. Thereafter, replicate it on the model directly yourself. This allows the model to look very coherent and very realistic. You'll be very surprised that not all highlights are round and not all highlights are square. So do this step and you can really see how complex shapes can be. Moving on, we're going to be painting in pure carmine onto the tab art. At this point of time, I'm just focusing on the faces, facing the source light, and ignoring the areas that are facing away from the source light. So the next stage, we're going to be painting the base colors of the skin. A bit of luminous flesh mixed in with mahogany and a little bit of magenta. As you can see, this generates a very light skin tone, suitable for this Sisters of Battle. Painting flashes is really particular. I'm really particular about this stage because the eye is inherently trained to detect human faces, and any mistakes are extremely glaring because eyes tend to be attracted towards the face. Unfortunately, I don't have much footage of this. If you need more footage of me painting faces, do check out the video. Links will be in the description below.
So recording while painting is really challenging, and I had a lot of problems painting the face while actually painting the model. So if you want a more detailed process of how I painted this female face, you can check out the video right here. Links will be in the description below. Let's get back to painting.
Alright, so we're going on to the external lights now, just using a little bit of magenta here, just to give a pop of where the external lights are showing. I'm going to be painting the under faces, as well as some of the areas such as the arms and the chest armor. What this does is it really frames the shadow side of the model, telling the audience that there is more to the figurine. Remember the magenta that we painted on during the airbrush stage? This is the actual light source. Well, this comes with a little bit of planning, and once you plan this carefully, and you can always execute it on the model because we've done it all the way from step 1. Next up, I'm going to be using sand yellow mixed in with a little bit of pale sand. This is going to be the strongest highlight on the yellows, which is the gold. You want to really reserve the strongest highlights and use it very sparingly. The reason why I'm only doing it in the very last stage is because if you use it too much, it will outshine the entire model and none of the details can be seen. Right here you can see me doing this very fine edge highlighting, and that will be very important because you want to define the model and make the model look even bigger than what it already is. Especially on the areas where the light touches the model, make sure you do it very sparingly. Next up, I'm going to be adding in a little bit of pale sand, pale blue, and a little bit of magenta. These are going to be the final highlights for the black armor. This part, at this point in time, you just have to do it very finely. Just only touch on the areas. Don't be too aggressive with that because you don't want the black armor to turn out as white armor. It is possible, I've done it myself before, so just learn from my mistakes and not be too overzealous with this very strong highlight that we have produced. So this is how the model looks right now. As you can see, the model is almost complete already. The only part left about this model would be the base that we should be painting pretty soon. But of course, we're going to be painting the base right now. So after being so focused on the model, it's a good time to start letting loose and quickly painting up the base. This project was meant to be a pretty fast, sketchy project, and I'm glad to see that I'm sticking with the plan. Just going with very simple colors. Magenta with a little bit of dark rust to base coat the metal colors on the base itself. When painting bases, some of my tips is that color separation is much more important than detail. Unless you're going for a competition where every single detail will be scrutinized, there's no need to really paint up to that kind of extent. And you just wanna, well, get this project done and dusted. So I'm just doing a lot of part separations here before I do some very mild details. But while you're doing mild details, it's also very important to take note. When you're choosing what details to do, these details need to communicate to the audience where the scene is and how the scene is being lit. If it's not doing one or the other, you're just wasting time. Okay, so right here I'm creating texture for the bases because the ruined cathedral that this Sister of Battle is running in is probably quite aged and damaged. So we have to gradually build up the stone texture through stippling. I find that this technique where I draw scratches and just brush over the tiles allows this figure to really look a lot bigger than it originally is, because you're adding in several more details that hasn't been sculpted in, and that itself creates a new level of display for the model. And the last stage, of course, sticking the model onto the base. Let's put in a little bit of super glue, hold it tight, blow a little bit because super glue hardens with moisture, and there we have it. This is the final product, and I'm really glad that I got to paint this Sisters of Battle at this scale. I hope you learned something and enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in a little bit.
So this was my entire process of 3D printing and airbrushing and eventually painting the entire model mostly by brush. What do you think of it? Remember, if you want to see more of these videos, let me know down in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, do give me a like and subscribe. I hope to catch you in the next video. See you!